Please welcome to the stage Bobby Franklin, my friend, President and CEO of the National Venture Capital Association. Bobby, thank you for joining us. You know, I was thinking maybe I should sit on the couch and you should interview me. But we'll do that another time. Bobby, thank you. I mean, I really wanted you. I want to tell people that Bobby was the first person I asked to speak in this forum because I wanted to have a better understanding of the capital parts of this economic equation that often don't get discussed and that aren't that are siloed somewhat. You've got your kind of investors, your private equity people, people that are out there providing venture capital, and they have their conferences, and then the people who are doing AI and buying bridges and hotels and all this other kind of stuff are in another part. But I wanted to make sure you were here, so I want you to describe to our audience, and we've got a very big C-SPAN audience watching right now, what role venture capital plays in our economy and what dials it up or dials it down?
That's a great question. Thanks for having me. So venture capital is often conflated with a lot of other capital asset allocators. And in some respects it makes sense, in some respects it makes absolutely no sense. So the way I think about and describe for policymakers the role that venture capital plays is enabling entrepreneurs, but not just any entrepreneur. Right? These are entrepreneurs that are trying to build the next Fortune 50 company in many cases. Now, not in all cases. In certain categories, like think about new drugs. 62% of new drugs approved by the FDA, studies show, are actually small venture-backed companies. Now, they often get bought by a big pharma company because you've got a shelf life of a patent protection, and you've got to get it to patients as quickly as you can. And if you're a startup company, you can't build that apparatus overnight. So it depends on kind of the area that you're focused on. But this is where the innovation happens. If you look at the top 8 out of the top 10 most valuable public companies in the world were once an entrepreneur that sat with a US venture capitalist and said, hey, I've got an idea. So if you think about what drives the country, where are net new jobs coming from? Kauffman Foundation did a study, and they said all major corporations over time expand in good times, contract in bad times. Mom and pops, as a group, start every day, fail every day. Net new job creation comes from young, high-growth companies. It makes sense when you stop and think about it, but these are new industries, new innovations, new products and services. So that's what's important, that we think about what over the long term is going to make sure the U.S. remains competitive with the rest of the world.
So what's hurting your industry now?
The challenge with the industry is that even though we play this outsized role in impacting U.S. competitiveness and innovation of all kinds for all over the world, the amount of capital that comes in is not dependent on people sitting back and thinking, like, I want to have a healthy stream of capital coming into the venture world. What happens is it's a result of what else is happening in the capital markets. Where are interest rates? Where can somebody get returns? So when interest rates are, kind of lower, and then people are looking for outsized returns, you tend to see more money coming in and more people participating, kind of earlier string. And so we're highly sensitive to where interest rates are.
So you do want recklessly low interest rates?
Not necessarily, but it would be nice, and there's no such thing as a perfect world, but it would be nice if there was a predictable, steady stream of capital coming to support the entrepreneurs in the U.S.
I was planning to, I did invite a couple of Federal Reserve Board governors. This week turns out to be a terrible week to get Federal Reserve Board governors. It's like their quiet period, something like that. I didn't even know they had a quiet period, but apparently, guess they do. But I was going to ask them, about, the interest rate struggles, because you've got, a big, big difference out there. So I get the notion that low interest rates, drive a lot of activity, but I also saw that we had high inflation. So, as you sort of look at the inflation, goal, are you at odds with some of the standards,
It takes so long to understand how the impact's going to be. We don't really play in that space. We don't try to, have an opinion on what interest rates are. We do have observations over when capital comes in and when it doesn't. And that's the challenge. And you think about people, limited partners, making investments, and general partners into private funds that venture capitalists use to go out and invest in entrepreneurs. the question is, well, when is it good, when is it bad? It's like, you really, to answer that question, have to know what the exit environment is going to be in 10 years.
Right.
Because the average time the investments in venture-backed companies are is 8, 9, it keeps growing.
So what's this, Bobby, what's the situation now? I remember quite a number of years ago, I interviewed Congressman John Delaney. Mm-hmm. John had, been a CEO. He was a Democrat, but he really believed in many of the same things you do. And he was trying to create a climate for repatriation of a lot of dollars being held abroad, because the American tax environment was, very toxic for that return of money. But he wanted to find various good ways to sort of, put it to good use. But at the time of the session, there was a lot of dollars were sitting on the sidelines all around the world, not coming into the country. Has that shifted?
Yes and no. I mean, think about over the last several years, there have been policy debates about when CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., right? There was a change. FIRMA was legislation, Foreign Investment Risk Modernization Review Act. That sort of put CFIUS on steroids. And so we had to work with policymakers to help them understand that I understand what you're saying about people from a foreign country making an investment that is ultimately going into high-tech, innovative companies, and you're concerned about whether or not they have access to all the secrets. And we had to help them understand that that's not the way the industry works. And if other folks are willing to, frankly, fund the more innovative environment in the United States, why shouldn't we let that happen? Mm. And then, of course, there have been, the other side, which is investment going outside the U.S., and that's a critical debate right now going on. What venture capitalists want is to have access to the greatest entrepreneurs in the world. They want to understand what's happening. And by the way, we as a country benefit from that greatly. And so that has, through policy debates, taken twists and turns over the last few years. So yes, there is sort of a healthy group of LPs that are investing in the U.S., but it's gotten a little more complicated.
Is there any place in the world that treats your industry better than the U.S. does?
I don't know enough about how venture firms in many other countries are doing. I go to an international meeting. In fact, I'll be going in February to Abu Dhabi to meet with my counterparts from around the world. And we often swap and share stories about what's happening in each other's countries. I get a little flavor of that. In the US, 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, 80 to 90% of all venture capital dollars were in the US. Mm. And over the last decade, that's dropped down to 50%. Now, that doesn't mean we have dropped down in our investment. It means every other country has figured out what this venture ecosystem looks like. How can you support entrepreneurs in a better way to make sure you're having innovation?
I don't know the UAE case, but one of the things that really interested me that Teresa Carlson of General Catalyst got into was, American entrepreneurs and players in this area fail, they get back up, they stand up. The one thing I know used to be the case in much of the Middle East, and I just don't know the standard now, was you failed, you were in jail. Well, you lost money, you were in jail. There were complex. Everybody wants to have a Silicon Valley in their backyard, but when it comes to what Vinod Khosla would do in fail.com, and bring in people. And I mean, remember the founder of Uber was went to student of fail.com. You kind of fail something, you kind of bring it together, and kind of learn from that. But that culture isn't naturally exportable. But your industry is used to it, right?
Well,
you guys invest in flops.
Exactly, and I think that you're really hitting on something that has been true and remains true today, which is in the U.S., failure is not shame on your family. It is not shame whether you get thrown in prison or whatever. There are a lot of parts around the world where if you fail, it is sort of the death knell, and you don't get to come back from that. And I think that's another kind of secret sauce for the U.S. innovation economy, which is we encourage failure. Mm. And when you are, when you have two or three failures,
encourage failure?
You don't encourage failure.
Go out and fail?
The point is, it's like you celebrate it because you know that you're that much closer to success. Huh. And so you see the serial entrepreneurs that keep trying, and then they hit it.
So, the other interesting, friend, I've talked to my friend David Malpass, who's out here about this before, about the U.S. economy and what's kind of churning. President Trump's shtick is that the U.S. economy is the hottest economy in the world. Everybody wants it. So, here's the bait. Here's the, it's a honey trap. For the rest of the world, you got to come in and, if you want to play in this economy, you're going to have to live by new rules and kind of come in. And I'm interested in when it comes to your global investors. whether or not the U.S. economy is so hot, they just need to be here because of the dynamism that's happening, and a lot of things are getting broken in terms of changing inertia and changing the ways we're doing. Is that the way your industry feels, or is President Trump, asserting something that's not true?
I think what he's asserting is true and has been true from before him and during him. And that is that because of what we just talked about, how rich the U.S. innovation entrepreneurial ecosystem has been, what it has led to, the successes, all the companies that have been created in this model, continue to be the envy of the world. I get emails all the time from folks overseas saying, can you help us find, things to invest in? I said, sorry, that's not my job. But it is, you know that there is still great demand to make sure there's investing in the U.S.
How important is the insurance industry in your world and the mortgage industry?
I don't see that as much. I appreciate the conversation I heard at dinner last night about some of the challenges.
We're about to repeat it right now.
I look forward to hearing it again. But I don't see that as much kind of in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Remember, you're thinking about making investments and wondering what's going to happen 10 years from now.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to Bobby Franklin, President of the National Venture Capital Association. Thank you so much for helping us understand capital's role in all of this.